and a continuation of looking at The Strange Situation by Mary Ainsworth. So just to pick up on yesterday, make it clear that we're looking at this part of the specification, Ainsworth's Strange Situation, types of attachment, secure, insecure, avoidant and insecure resistant. So yesterday we went through some of this PowerPoint and I tried to outline the different attachment types. So essentially there are 3 types of attachment that were identified by Ainsworth and Bell's study: secure, insecure avoidant and insecure resistant. And you do need to know these figures on the board. You need to know that 70% were securely attached, 20% insecure avoidant and 10% insecure resistant, and you do need to know that it is the primary carer's behaviour that largely determines the attachment type. So just to go back, we know the stages of attachment, we know how an attachment is formed, and we now know that there are different types. So remember, not everybody develops the same type of attachment. So this is a secure attachment, and again, there I've mentioned just 3 behaviours, but there are some others that you might want to add into this if you look in the Green Herb book. So we've got anxiety, if you like, separation anxiety. We've got reunion behaviour, and we've got stranger anxiety. You've also got willingness to explore and secure base as well. Insecure avoidant, quite high amounts in the UK generally. Unconcerned by mother's absence, so we've got very low separation anxiety. Unresponsive when she returns, so very no reunion behaviour, and low stranger anxiety. And then the difficult one to actually see is the resistant one, and these are children who show very mixed reactions, but they will show intense distress. So when you first see these, they might look like it might look like a secure attachment at the start, because some children do show quite a lot of distress, but the difference is the reunion, really, and that's one of the key things. The other thing that isn't mentioned on here is the lack of willingness to explore, and usually a child who is insecure resistant will not want to explore and will stay very close to the mum. Okay, we're going to have a look at an application question now. So you should already have this PowerPoint. And if you have a look in your Green Herb book, there is an exam question which looks at the case of James. So if you can find that and have a quick look at it, and then there is an answer here. I'm just going to talk you through how to answer a question like this. So first of all, the bit in red, if you can see, is where you actually show your psychology. So with an applied question, this is the actual theory. And then the rest of the question is the application element. So when I come to see you in class and we look at application questions, we'll be splitting them up into 2 different colours to identify where you've got the psychology and where you've got the application. And I will do some application with you when we are in class. I'm just going to go to find, hopefully, on here, some of the scenarios that I think I should have uploaded. Sorry, I should have done this before I did the video. Yeah, here we go. So, strange situation scenarios. This should be uploaded onto Teams. What I'd like you to do is have a look at these and state which attachment type the child is according to Ainsworth's strange situation. Now, in order to do that, I'd like you to try to highlight key phrases or words. Okay, so if you want to just have a look at this, so child A, Sarah's at the park, her mum quickly pops to a shop while Sarah's playing. She can't see her mum, she can only see strangers. She continues playing seemingly unbothered by the absence of her mother. So what kind of attachment is this? I would suggest that this is insecure avoidant, because she's unconcerned by the mother's absence. There isn't really any kind of interaction or being bothered about the stranger. Freddie's watching a TV programme or playing, he becomes scared, climbs onto his mum's lap, he's comforted by his mum and calms down. When he's calmer, he climbs down and continues playing. I would suggest that this was a secure attachment, because we have got somebody, and I know it's not made clear on here, but we've got a child who uses his mum as a secure base. So a key thing on this is he goes to his mum because she is secure for him, he receives comfort from her, and then he's able to play. This next one, child C, Sam is dropped off by his mother at the house of a new babysitter. When the mum leaves, he cries incessantly, so we've got high distress. The babysitter can't calm him down. Later on, when his mum comes to pick him up, she tries to comfort him. He still cries, but he tries to push his mum away. So again, this is resistant, but you might not see all of it, because what we've got here is we've not really got clinginess, we've got rejection, but we've got this crying on return and intense distress. Okay, see if you can go through the rest of these, and you should be able to identify the attachment types until you get to child F. And I would just like to talk about child F. You don't need this particularly for the strange situation, but usually when I'm teaching this, I bring this in here now. So let's just have a look at child F, which is quite an unusual case. So let's just highlight this just to make sure that you're all aware of the one we're looking at. So at a family get-together, Bruce goes from adult to adult wanting attention. His mum is not favoured over other adults. When he's taken upstairs to bed, he cries when the door is closed and he's by himself. Now, this is quite interesting because it doesn't actually fit with any of those attachment types. And this is a different attachment type. I don't want you to use it in the strange situation, but you are going to need it through the attachment unit. So usually I bring this in here. And this attachment style or type is called, it's actually a disorder. It's called disinhibited attachment disorder. And if you're disinhibited, you lose your inhibitions. So in other words, somebody who loses their inhibitions, maybe when they're drunk or when they're on some kind of psychoactive active drug, they do things that they wouldn't normally do, and they don't really have many boundaries. So what happens here is this is a child who doesn't differentiate between different people. So they will react with a stranger and a parent exactly the same. They are happy to interact with unfamiliar adults exactly in the same way that they would interact with familiar adults. And the child that we were looking at in the scenario then was happy to go from adult to adult. That doesn't fit with any of those three attachment styles. And here we've got, it says the most obvious symptom is the absence of a normal fear or discretion when approaching strangers. Because it's not normal, really. And I don't like saying not normal because it's stereotyping, but just think about it to understand it. Children are not usually comfortable touching and being around strangers, but these children are. I want you to keep this in your head because you're going to see this when we start to look at children who are orphans. You're going to see this particular attachment disorder around children who have failed to form an early attachment. So I'd just like to bring it up here so you're aware of it. Okay, so if we're going back to just thinking about the strange situation and just explaining how it fits in. So we've got the primary carer's behaviour towards the child, so that would be the mum or the main carer. That leads to an internal working model. So there is the first template. Now, depending on the way that primary carer is, depends on the internal working model. So if that primary carer is positive and loved, and they treat the child with respect, positive, consistent, the child will have a secure attachment. If the child generally feels unloved and quite rejected and quite ignored and not really interactive with, they're going to develop an avoidant attachment. And again, if the kind of care that they receive from their mum or their primary caregiver is quite inconsistent, quite confused, mixed, then that's going to result in a resistant child. So where did these attachment styles come from? Ainsworth believes they originally result from the mum, but look how this ties in with Bowlby's model, because we're bringing in the internal working model here. So you can see how we've literally got Bowlby's internal working model being the basis for what the attachments are likely to be. So you don't necessarily need this diagram, but it's just to help you try to understand about what the attachments are like. So evaluation of strange situation. This would really be another lesson, but I want you to have a look at it now. Again, when you're evaluating, generally you need a couple of things for me to evaluate. You need to know what the research method is and who the sample is. And then you know that you've got a lot of stuff that you can evaluate with. So I want you to think, first of all, about culture and ecological validity. And in year 2, we're going to be revisiting this when we start to look at cultural bias. And you might think it's not necessarily culturally biased. But what I would like you to think about is in what way could it be? So culturally biased from several perspectives. From the researchers, because she's from a Western culture. I think she's Canadian. So she's going to impose, put on her own cultural beliefs as being correct. So we've got researcher bias in terms of culture. We've also got children who are all middle class, who are all from one particular area in one particular culture, and therefore we've got an issue with validity in terms of that. So remember that problems with culture do affect validity. So in terms of validity, what else have we got that's a problem? Ecological validity is about real life. And one of the problems here is that we're not in a real life situation. It is a created environment that the child is likely to feel uncomfortable in, and therefore will reduce the validity. So let's just look at what some of the issues are with validity in this research. First of all, one of the issues is it only measures the attachment to the mother. So therefore it's limited because it only offers us one attachment explanation. So are we to believe that a child develops its attachment type just based on its mum? Probably not. So how about if the dad is different? Are you going to get several attachment types and styles? Are you going to have different attachment types with different people? It doesn't take that into account. So just remember, it's quite limited because it only measures the attachment to the mother, and therefore it's not a complete valid measure of attachment, is it? Because it doesn't give us a completely holistic one. It only tells us about the attachment to the mother. And it doesn't consider the temperament of the child. It only looks at the internal working model. Now, if you think about and you've come across and looked at and talked to people who have babies, you will know that they're all very different, and it's not just to do with the mother or the father. Some babies are more tetchy than others. And one of the problems with the strange situation is it does not consider the temperament of the child. What if a child is naturally nervous, naturally anxious? Demand characteristics, probably not from the baby. Although in the videos that I showed you, that some of the children, the babies, were getting distracted, and that could therefore affect the study. But certainly the mum might engage in behaviours that she wouldn't normally do because she's in a study. And therefore that reduces the validity because we're not getting a true picture. We're probably going to see a lot of social desirability bias because the mums do want to be presented in a good light. I want you to think about reliability, and I know you haven't looked at this properly, but we are going to look at this in September fully and through October. And reliability is different from validity in that validity is, does it measure what it intends to? And if you have a look at the 3 things at the top, you will see that they all relate to, does it measure what it intends to? Reliability is about if you use this measurement over and over, do you get the same results? So this is the strange situation reliable? And generally, yes, it is. Because you're not looking at the outcome, you're looking at the measuring tool. So the tool is actually quite reliable, and there's some terminology here that you need to go and have a look at, and it says inter-rater reliability, and that's why I focused on looking at what the behaviours were that we were measuring, because if two or more people can look at those behaviours and say, yes, that's what I'm looking for, then it has high inter-rater reliability. You need to know what this is, and you need to know how to calculate it, and we will look at that from September onwards, so don't worry about that. Sometimes it's called inter-observer reliability. They both mean the same thing. So a strength is this has good inter-rater reliability. And the other thing is, because it's a controlled observation, it is reliable because you can repeat it, because we know what we're looking for. It's got standardized instructions, standardized procedures, and so on. And another way in which it's reliable is that it has standardized behavioral categories. I will show you when I see you next how to design an observation and what behavioral categories are. I'll try and have a go at doing a video this week looking at it, but I really need to be able to write somewhere, so I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to do it using this method. Okay, they're just some of the findings. What I would like you to do now is have a look at the evaluation for this, and attached somewhere on the Teams under the files you should have several studies, and I would like you to look at how they support or challenge Bowlby's theory. How they support or challenge the work by Ainsworth. What I would also like you to do is to create 3 or 4 peel points for the strange situation. And I would like you to think about the sample used, whether it has population validity. I would like you to think about the research method used, and in terms of the realism. That's the easiest way to evaluate. If we just quickly flick to the booklet, so if we just go here and have a look at the attachment booklet, I'll make it a little bit smaller so that it fits into the page. There we go. If we go and have a look here, I'm not sure which page it is, so I'll just keep going. If you turn to, let's just find it. Here we go. So if you start looking sort of page 25 onwards, when we get to page 29, there is a bit of an evaluation there, and there are some peel points, although I would prefer you to develop those yourself. So we've got the ecological validity and an explanation why. We've got a problem with internal validity, which largely is demand characteristics. We've got a problem with cultural validity, which we are going to look at over the next couple of lessons. And we've got this idea that it's only looking at one attachment type. There are then, again, we've got the temperament of the child. There are then some exam questions, and I would like you to think about whether you would be able to answer these exam questions and any problems with them. Identify, state, 1 mark, and explain, another mark, 1 type of attachment. Secure attachment would get you 1 mark. A sentence to just explain what it is. I would advise, if you are doing that, that you use the points here. So you say, for example, reunion behaviour would be this. For example, stranger anxiety would be this. And that's generally how you would attack a question like that. Okay, so if we look at the next one, which is 4 marks, outline the strange situation procedure. Notice it's only the procedure, so you don't have to say what they found. So you say what they did. So in that, you would need to talk about the research method used, and for this, you would need to go through as many of the steps that I'm going to show you now as possible. Now, there is no way that you will be able to go through all of the stages of the strange situation, but you might be able to go through some of these 8 episodes. So if you have a look in your textbook and you have a look at the notes, you should be able to find what those 8 episodes are. So things like mum leaves the room, child left alone, stranger enters, and so on. So that's what you would need to answer that question. What you would not receive credit for at all in that is for outlining any findings. You also don't need to name and talk about the attachment types. You are looking at the procedure. So what actually is it? What are you looking for and what is being measured? Question number 3. Explain one limitation. This is a peel point. I would give a full peel point. What you need to be very careful of with this is that you stay on point. So one limitation of the strange situation to investigate attachment types is that it is culturally biased. It's culturally biased because it only looks at a Western perspective of attachments. Mary Ainsworth was a researcher from Canada and therefore looked at attachment types from her perspective. This is culturally biased and therefore doesn't tell us anything about attachment types in other cultures, for example in Japan, and that's something we're going to look at. Describe and evaluate the strange situation. This is where you would just say what it is and then you're going to give 3 or 4 peel points. We will have a go at that. And I will try to find some example answers for you, and next week you will be doing some exam questions on this. If there are any queries, please contact me. I will try to upload something on observations and how to carry them out.